All right, welcome to this episode of Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we're going to talk about how CRT, critical race theory, manifests at BYU and anywhere, really. This is exactly what you would expect once things start running amok with critical race theory and critical social justice in an environment that there is very little check on these things. So this is something that has gone around quite a bit. I've had probably no less than a dozen different sources send me a copy over the last week of this assignment that was given out at BYU. This is an assignment from a sociology professor that was given in a sociology class. And the assignment is called Revealing Whiteness Activity. And here's what happens. And I'm going to go through this assignment. I'm going to show it to you. But when I'm done, I'm also going to go through a few other things that students have brought up to me. As you can imagine, I get from BYU as an example, I get professors contacting me. I get administrators. I get support staff, students, right, that send me a number of different things. And I don't usually go over most of them, but what they do is help inform me and help me get a good idea of what I should be doing in terms of putting this information out there. So the last episode I did on BYU, part of what initiated that is additional information from students and from faculty on things that are happening on campus. And it's like, okay, I've got to do more. I've got to get more of this out there. This assignment here, so what I'm going to do at the end here is I'm going to go over a few other examples of a few things, in this case, that students have brought up to me as to what's happening on campus at BYU. But this is something that has gone around quite a bit, I believe, and just looking around on social media. And this is the assignment called Revealing Whiteness Activity in this sociology class. So let's take a look at that and go through it together. And this is so standard for what you would imagine. It's just you don't imagine it happening at a place like BYU. Revealing Whiteness Activity, here's what it says. In a team of 2 or 3 students, spend 30 minutes exploring some elements of the physical and social environment at BYU. As a predominantly white institution, and then in parentheses, a PWI, right? This is a PWI, BYU, a predominantly white institution, classified, right? BYU not only has a disproportionate number of white students in its student body compared to the U.S. population as a whole, which is true, but it also has different aspects of whiteness, right? The evilness of whiteness. So different aspects of whiteness built into its physical and social environment. Your goal as a team is to photograph and describe at least 3 different manifestations of whiteness that you find around campus. Now, this might be something that is a still photograph. It might be a picture, a photograph of a person or a conversation. By the way, whenever you hear the term whiteness, substitute it with Jewishness and see how it feels to you, right? Let me repeat that using Jewishness here as an example. But not only has a disproportionate number of white students in its student body compared to the U.S. as a population, but it also has different aspects of Jewishness built into its physical and social environment. Your goal as a team is to photograph and describe at least 3 different manifestations of Jewishness that you find around campus. How uncomfortable does that make you feel? Whiteness is a pejorative. It is a racist pejorative that is completely accepted in academia. Now, one member of your team will upload your photos to Learning Suite, some digital dialogue with brief descriptions of how each photo reveals an aspect of whiteness on campus. This is disgusting. what is happening here. A team member's name, your 3 photos and their titles. And then, of course, we get the wonderful reference to Robin DiAngelo, right, who writes about white fragility, right, and other things. And it's really where we get the term critical social justice from, is actually from Robin DiAngelo, a very popular speaker, a very popular author who writes about whiteness. And as explained by Robin DiAngelo, whiteness refers to the specific dimensions of racism that serve to elevate white people over people of color. Whiteness describes a social process. She and other whiteness scholars, and then we're going to go into a few different points here that she says, but understand what whiteness is talking about here, right? This is a some call it reverse race. It's just racism. It's just racism is all it is. And as Robin DiAngelo explains, if you are white, you are a racist no matter what. And even if you deny being a racist, that is a racist statement. Or if there is a conversation or a transaction, some kind of communication that exists between people, it's not if there was racism, but where do we find the racism? And that's what this assignment is really all about. Go and discover it. Find it everywhere you can. And this is what gets equated at a place like BYU with the prophet's charge to go out and root out racism. This is not, it's a conflation of taking a Marxian, disgusting, critical social justice approach to the prophet's words. As if you would go out and say, boy, how are we going to root out poverty? Let's try communism. Let's try a Marxist approach to rooting out communism. And if you don't believe that communism is the answer, well, then you must hate poor people. You must look down on lower classes. That's the same exact thing that is happening here. So moving on here to the bullet points that are in this assignment, she says she, being Robin DiAngelo, and other whiteness scholars, imagine being a whiteness scholar, use whiteness to signify a set of locations that are historically, socially, politically, and culturally produced, and which are intrinsically linked to dynamic relations of domination. We must fight off the oppressors. It's point 2, conceptualize whiteness as a constellation of processes and practices, right? Systems. I'm going to go over a very interesting talk from about 50 years ago by Neil A. Maxwell that was sent to me by a listener. And this is unbelievably prophetic based on what is happening now with critical social justice and critical theories like critical race theory. Constellation of processes and practices rather than as a discrete entity like skin color alone, including basic rights, values, beliefs, perspectives, and experiences purported to be commonly shared by all, but which are actually only consistently afforded to white people. Hey, I'm in a total agreement where this might happen. Wherever this might happen, let me know. I'll go out and I'll be the first one in line to go fight against that. Absolutely. Right? But to go out and try and discover every little place where you can find some semblance of racism, which is a moving target now, that definition is very much a moving target, is a very dangerous place to go. Because, again, it's not if racism happens, it's where it happens, how it happens. And so you can always find it. And so you're always trying to put forward your best anti-racist self in every situation at all times. Think about that. The next point is that the scholars see whiteness as dynamic, relational, and operating at all times on multiple levels, right? This is anti-racism, whiteness, critical race theory. Just like all critical theories and Marxian ideologies, they are like the gospel in that they require your total heart, might, mind, and strength. They require total dedication at all times. That is one reason why it is in total conflict with the gospel of Jesus Christ. The last bullet point here, the scholars begin with the premise that racism and white privilege exist in both traditional and modern forms, rather than work to prove its existence, work to reveal it, right? Rather than work to prove its existence, work to reveal it. In other words, if it's not on the surface, dig deep, keep digging deeper and deeper to find it. Imagine how you are warping these kids' minds as you go through this type of a process. Now, in addition to this assignment, there are many, many different examples that are sent to me. And maybe little by little, at least if I've got the consent of those that have sent me these examples, I will cover them from time to time. I want to just go over a few here because I don't want to spend too much time on covering all of these things. But I will, and by the way, if you have an example of this, if you are administration, professor, student, support staff, then let me know. And it's not something that I might necessarily use, but it helps inform me as I put these episodes together and try and get this information out there. And by the way, I'm not looking, and I know that this assignment, for example, is already out there on social media everywhere with the name of the class and the professor. I don't usually do that. As you've noticed, I've covered that up here. And there has been one occasion, my last video, where I left the names up on the Zoom, the Zoom lectures and presentations, because I do think it's also important that parents know maybe who they want to try to avoid. I think that, but I'm doing this not to get them fired. I'm not doing this to pile onto them or anything like that. The reason I'm doing it is awareness. We need to be aware of what is happening. And just like every university, BYU is a part of academia, and they are, in many cases, some of these professors are baptized into the religion of academia, critical social justice. So anyway, back to some of the examples here of some of the students. I'm just going to go over a few of these here. There are 3 examples that I've received from different students. These are all going to be about students in this episode. But these are 3 different examples that are almost the same thing. They're pretty much the exact same thing. I'm going to quote from one of these emails that I received. This is what this student said happened to them in their class. And these are 3 examples in 3 different semesters. This semester, last semester, and in the winter semester of 2021. All right. So these are 3 complete different examples. This isn't all one event. And I'm sure this happens all the time. But this is what they said the professor said to them. The professor asked the question, who in this class is a racist? Raise your hand. For those of you who did not raise your hand, the professor says, you need to raise your hand. You are all racist. So that's the quote from one of those 3, but the example is exactly the same thing, right? They ask everyone who's a racist. Where are they getting this information from? Why are they creating these exercises for these kids in these schools? And by the way, this could be a freshman in a general ed class 2 weeks away from their home, right? In their very first semester. And this is what they're getting taught. And I have examples of that in their very first semester where these types of things are brought up. So imagine that. Who in this class is a racist? Raise your hand. For those of you who did not raise your hand, you need to raise your hand. You are all racist. Boom. Welcome to BYU. Here's another one. And I'm quoting this student as well. She says, when I asked my professor why we were talking about Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, when it is based on Marxist ideas, he said that it was not Marxist, right? And that it was the best book available on fighting racism, like President Nelson has asked us to do. You can see what is happening with this kind of wide open charge of let's root out racism. Right? Again, if we were talking about rooting out poverty, would you say that communism, Marxism is the best way to do that? And by the way, a lot of these professors would agree that it is. I've talked to them. I've been on social media with them. I've had conversations with them. A number of these professors do believe that that is the best way to root out poverty. So that gives you another example of kind of what's happening here at somewhere like BYU. Here's another one from a student. He says, I received an email from my college, the College of Life Sciences. This is life sciences, right? Midway through the email, there was a bold bullet point advocating the reading of Ibram X. Kendi's book, as if that has anything to do with focusing on life sciences, becoming a Kendi anti-racist. There were also other books in an Excel spreadsheet created by the Department of Public Health. Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, was on there, as were a number of other CRT-style texts. I have seen that spreadsheet, and I can tell you that there are several books in there that are focused on a very Marxian, critical social justice type of anti-racism and whiteness and white privilege. This is in life sciences. Here's part of that email, in fact. It says in bold print, read How to Be an Anti-Racist. That's Ibram Kendi's book. Public Health has put together a list of books for people who want to gain a greater understanding and perspective on diversity, equality, and inclusion. That's DEI, right? How to Be an Anti-Racist takes readers through a widening circle of anti-racist ideas to help readers see all forms of racism and their consequences clearly. This book is available through the HBLL, that's the BYU Library, or it is available for purchase on Amazon. So it's a promotion of hard leftist ideas in anti-racism in life sciences. This isn't just in the humanities here. Lastly, in this example, and now as I'm reading it right now, this might be BYU Idaho. I'm not positive. It's either BYU Idaho or BYU Provo, but there's a quiz or a survey, basically, and maybe it's an assignment of some sort that is given out, and it's all about Peggy McIntosh's white privilege. And here's what it says about it. I want to talk about it here. Examine Peggy McIntosh's list of white privilege, the list of what creates white privilege, which is the most surprising to you in that list. Why? Which do you think would be the easiest to correct in the list? Which would be the hardest to fix? Why? And then the assignment goes to Black Lives Matter, and it says, as you observe the Black Lives Matter movement today, consider whether or not lukewarm acceptance poses more of a problem than outright opposition. Why might this be the case? In other words, if you are not marching with Black Lives Matter, then you are lukewarm, right? Where does this professor stand on these things? Why might this be the case? What might white moderates sound like today? What might they say? What do you think is the difference between appeasement and actual healing in these matters? Look, I have no problem with talking about social issues and race issues, but over and over again, the trend at BYU is along the lines of the religion of academia. It's the same thing. It is supplanting an education on the focus of the topic at hand of the department with anti-racism and critical social justice, critical race theory. These become the highest values of every department. And it's going to happen in the church for a lot of individuals. This is what I'm going to go over with Neil A. Maxwell. It is going to become the highest value for some individuals, as it has with many already. But in the church, anti-racism, critical race theory, intersectionality will become a higher value than the doctrine of Christ, than the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's already happened. I get a lot of those instances as well from the pulpit, young women's classes, elders quorum, relief society, etc. Right? I know sometimes it becomes confusing. But you've got to use Elder Oak's clear thinking on this. You've got to parse these things out. I will say that I am very encouraged by Elder Clark Gilbert. He is was put into place last year as the general authority. He's a 70 over the CES program. He used to be the president of Pathway, of BYU Pathway. And he gave the things that I've heard about him and the talk he gave, the devotional he gave last week, which I probably should have covered, but I was sick, was very encouraging. So those are encouraging things that we can look at for BYU. They've also recently made a change in who they hire for their CES, for their religious studies, right? And they've put in place that you've got to have, they're going to hire more from within, where they are taught and where it's faith-based and it's not. See, what happens is you bring in these professors, which you also need. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you need new ideas and you need diversity to some degree, but this is about a church university. So you can't get out of hand with that. And so when you hire from within in CES, it is much more faith promoting. And you just need to then encourage those individuals that are teaching to be able to look at things in a nuanced manner and not just kind of sweep certain things under the rug, because that's a problem also. You move from one end where you get what we have today with critical race theory entering everything, and then you can go all the way to the other end of the spectrum with fundamentalism. You don't want either one of those. It's a hard thing to balance. So that is an encouraging thing for BYU. I'll talk to you next time.